Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Mark Romoff.
Yeah, not bad, not bad. It's going to get better. You know, I think I'll get the best round of applause at the final session of this conference. I'm looking forward to that one. So, this is a really interesting session we've got planned now, especially if you have interest in what's happening in markets around the world, and particularly markets that are on the verge of really taking up P3s in a very serious way. So, it's a great session. I hope you'll find it interesting. And again, think of questions that you might want to ask the folks that are on this panel. I'm going to start by introducing Michael Lindsay. Many of you may know Michael. He is with Hatch. He's Global Director, Infrastructure Planning and Advisory, and Hatch has kindly agreed to sponsor this session. So, Michael, I'm going to turn the podium over to you. Thank you very much for coming back for this session. Even better.
Thanks very much, Mark. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hatch is very pleased to be sponsoring this morning's general session, which is provocatively entitled, What's Hot? What's Needed in Advancing International P3 Markets? This panel session is going to focus on 4 active and advancing international markets that are hoping to emulate some of the P3 success that we've achieved here in Canada. Each has a substantial pipeline of large infrastructure projects and increased prospects for international expertise and investment. Our moderator this morning is the very distinguished Jordan Schwartz. Jordan has worked in the field of infrastructure development since 1991. He's currently the World Bank's Director for Infrastructure, PPPs, and Guarantees, the IPG Group. In his prior role, Jordan was Director of the Infrastructure and Urban Development Hub in Singapore, a center of World Bank operational and analytical activity, covering the sectors of transport, ICT, water, energy, urban development, trade, and infrastructure finance. Jordan has written extensively on the relationship of risk to infrastructure investment and is co-author of the book Uncovering the Drivers of Utility Performance, the Role of the Private Sector, Regulation, and Governance. And I'm sure, Jordan, that book is available at fine bookstores everywhere, right? Yeah. Please join me in welcoming Jordan and the panel.
So much. No, I didn't come here to hawk my book. It's free, actually, so I wouldn't be a very good salesperson if I spent time selling a free book. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Very excited to have a great panel of leaders in the space of emerging market and development economy, PPPs. These 3 middle-income countries are currently leading in bringing projects to market, in creating investment opportunities, in trying to close the service gaps of their countries through creative approaches to the procurement of infrastructure services. So just, you have, I think, the details of their bios, but so you know who's here, we have Sergio Forte. He's a Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Head of Investor Relations for BANOBRAS. We have Strover Maganedisa, Acting Chief Director for Transaction Advisory Services and PPPs in the Republic of South Africa. That's under the National Treasury. And Alberto Ñecco, the Executive Director of ProInversión, the private investment promotion agency of Peru. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. What we thought we would do is, I understand that Sergio has a few slides and a little bit of background on BANOBRAS and the program that Mexico is putting together in PPPs. And what I thought I would do is give just a couple of words of kind of introduction to the context of PPPs in emerging markets and developing economies, and then turn it over to you, Sergio, to get us started with some slides. So from the World Bank's perspective, we focus exclusively on what we refer to as emerging markets and developing economies. Those are lower and middle income countries, and provide support directly through financing of governments, but also support and investment with the private sector, both equity, debt, a wide range of credit enhancements, guarantees, insurance products. Sort of the mission of the institution is focused on the alleviation of poverty, and we see the role of PPPs as a growing part of the mission of improving basic services. traditionally in what we might refer to as economic infrastructure and transport, in the energy sectors and telecommunications and water, but also increasingly in social sectors as well, such as health and education, as you've heard over the last couple of days. We look at this market as perhaps the next great frontier of investment opportunities for a large set of equity investors, for debt providers, financiers, for project companies, EPC contractors. The emerging markets provide, of course, a tremendous amount of growth opportunity, the underlying economic growth that we don't see in fully developed countries, and maybe more to the point, the level of investment that we expect in infrastructure in the basic infrastructure in these countries is to grow considerably over the next several years, and we think that a growing share of this will be in PPPs. Just to give some numbers, we track all of the infrastructure projects that come to financial close in all emerging markets in the basic sectors, as well as the levels of investment that are currently going into infrastructure. We see about, depending on the year, about $1.5 trillion of investment in infrastructure, largely still through public coffers. And the PPP market, depending on the year, is somewhere between $150 and $180 billion in these countries. So it's a relatively small share, but as these countries brush up against fiscal constraints, look to diversify their forms of financing, become more and more concerned with introducing technology and efficiency into the service delivery, as the middle class grows, as their populations urbanize, and the pressures for better service delivery mount, we see the PPP market growing in the years ahead. And so we turn to countries that have had considerable experience already, as I think as Mark mentioned before, these are countries that have turned to Canada, to the few places around the world that have established experiences to see how they can better learn from the regulatory arrangements, from the financial structures, from the capacity, and themselves have brought lessons to the world on how to structure PPPs. Today we'll talk, I guess, a bit about the institutions that are run by these gentlemen, as well as the investment opportunities that Peru, Mexico, and South Africa has to offer. So Sergio, with your permission, we'll ask you to say a few words about the Mexican program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Orlando. If you can run the presentation. Okay. Just 3 slides to explain you what is BANOBRAS and what we are doing about PPPs in Mexico. BANOBRAS is a Mexican Infrastructure Development Bank. It's a federal government agency. And its loan portfolio is, first of all, in Mexico, the loan portfolio is about $300 billion. To give you an idea, it's more or less the same portfolio of the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, that is the 5th largest bank in Canada. So we are a small economy for you. In BANOBRAS specifically is more or less a tenth of the whole banking system in Mexico, with a portfolio of $27 billion. And 1/3 of it, $9 billion, are specifically in project finance directly for PPPs, most of them. But besides its loan portfolio, BANOBRAS also has the mandate to promote PPPs. And so it has 3 different instruments. One of it is the National Infrastructure Fund that have assets it's a governmental trust that have assets for around $150 billion. It gives assistance to the local governments in order to promote better practices. And recently, BANOBRAS created the Investor Relations Office. That's the one which I am in charge of. This office has 3 mandates now. We mapped what was needed in the Mexican market in order to promote more these PPPs. One of it was about project development. We are giving technical assistance to federal entities that doesn't have the capabilities. We have a lot of experience in water projects and toll roads, but there are another new PPP projects that are in health sector, in education, etc. So we are trying to help these institutions to develop their PPP programs. We also see that there wasn't enough information about the projects that were happening in Mexico, and to enforce the investor relations with the Mexican government, because Mexico has a platform that is called ProMexico that has a lot of experience promoting trade and investments, but the infrastructure side is a little more specifically, so you need to see different kind of investors and different kind of needs. So we created an investor relations office there. And a new mandate that has given to us is to try to develop a national infrastructure promotion center. The idea of this office will be to arrange all the planning programs of the different entities in a view or to the long term. Finally, I would like to present you the Mexico Projects Hub. Its address is www.mexicoprojectshub.gov.mx, gov with a B as Bravo. I invite you to Google it or to go directly to this web page. In this web page, we're trying to make it simple and functional for you. It is fully bilingual, and we updated it in a daily basis. It has multi-sectoral information. We put here projects from the energy sector or the health system, etc. And what we want to do finally is to give you advanced visibility of what projects are coming to Mexico, but not only in advance, but which of them are in progress and some information about brownfields. Now in the platform we have more than 400 different new projects, including federal PPPs, concessions, finance public works, and other type of contracts that require private investment. Most of them in the energy sector derived from the energy reform in Mexico. So there are a lot of opportunities in Mexico that you can find out in this platform. That's all.
Thank you, Sergio. And just to mention, before we ask Strover to tell us a little bit about the South Africa program and structure, that there is the conference app. If you have questions that you'd like to ask the panel, I'll even put on my glasses, make sure I can read them correctly, and we'll be happy to take questions from yourselves directly once we work our way through a little bit of background about each of the institutions, just as Sergio has done. Strover, tell us a little bit about the South Africa program, if you'd be so kind.
Good morning, everyone. Now we're hopping from Mexico to South Africa. It's a huge leap. In South Africa, we have what we call a PPP unit. That PPP unit has evolved. Now, recently, we have devolved some of the responsibilities to split them into two. Because before we used to be the regulator and also the advice providers. So the regulation function now has been given to National Treasury, and we have formed what we call Government Technical Advisory Center that provides advice to all spheres of government. Over and above that, we have concluded 31 projects to financial close, and totaling an amount of 65 billion rands. And those projects start from prisons, office accommodation, roads, over and above that, water. And transport. What we are focusing on going forward, I mean, based on the PPP only, I'm not going to speak about the renewable independent producer pipeline, because I'm sure you are familiar with that one. It's a program that started within the PPP unit. It grown so big that we had to let it go. So it became an independent office on its own, and it totals about 92 billion rands. And the windows that have closed, they've closed quite a number of projects now, and some of them are in implementation, some of them are operational. So that put that on ice. The programs that we're working on now, we are working with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to create a project bond. I think that's the part that we will need probably your assistance in that, because we have completed doing the due diligence and also the vetting process, and all the documents are ready. They're going to go out to the market for public comment. That on its own, we intend to be able to fund all our infrastructure projects. And more so, we are looking in terms of our rapid rail network system, which is the Gautrain, that has been implemented. It's about 30 billion rands, but we're looking at the expansion program of that, and it's a huge project. And over and above, we're going to be doing a variation on the existing contract to add on terms of the rolling stock on that Gautrain, because it has proven to have met our expectations, and the ridership has increased more than we expected, which is a good outcome. And moving away from transport, on the real estate, I think we've got a bigger portfolio in terms of office accommodation there. Each and every province, we've got 9 provinces, they are intending into creating their own government boulevard, which is a precinct. And over and above that, the capital city of South Africa, which is Pretoria, we are urgently in need of 17 departmental buildings as we speak. And that portfolio is total about 20 to 22 billion rands in terms of numbers. So those are the projects that we're working on. And there's a list of other projects in different sectors which are at feasibility study, heading to procurement, which are 21, from water and education. I mean, we've bundled up 120 schools just to take them out on tender on education. And on student accommodation, I mean, the numbers are scary. I don't want to say what is a bedrock, but I can tell you the opportunity which is there, meaning that our student accommodation only caters for 20% of the entire student portfolio. So we're looking at coming up with a program that goes, we're running a pilot now with 6 varsities, but after that pilot, we're going to be able to issue out for the entire country. That's on your student accommodation. And taking it further with regards to the water, specifically on water, we're having our own challenges with regards to the shortage of the anticipated rain during the summer. And that's basically based on the global warming that we've been talking about today and yesterday. And for example, Cape Town, as we speak now, doesn't have water at all. They're exploring to look at options of putting some desalination plants as an agent strategy to alleviate the problem that we're facing. So in a nutshell, those are the type of projects that are there. And I think probably based on our discussion and question, I'll be able to give you more information depending on your interest.
Thank you so much, Strover. Alberto, tell us a little bit about the Peruvian equivalent. Where is ProInversión right now in its processes, and give us a sense of the program looking forward?
Sure. We basically act as the structuring and executing agents for the Peruvian government. We are basically an advisor the ministries and the local governments, regional governments, when it comes to taking projects into a PPP structure. Currently, there are different estimates that the Peruvian infrastructure gap should be somewhere around $160 billion estimate. This gap, it's supposed, will be covered through public works and P3 projects. So in our mandate, we have a goal of securing at least until 2020 a $20 billion total investment portfolio. Right now, we are working on implementing a new legal framework that has been put in place at the beginning of the year that will allow us to increase project readiness in our projects in order to improve project delivery. Through our history, and this is because P3 projects have been running for more than a decade in Peru, so we have kind of a long history working with this. We have found that a lot of the issues with finally executing this project come from project readiness. And most of these project readiness come from interferences, land acquisition, right-of-way, and technical feasibility studies early on in the front end of the process, which is the formulation. So the new regulation requires for a revised business case to be prepared before we are actually allowed to take this to the market. And we have now to identify all of the interferences and possible problems that these projects might encounter when they go to project delivery, and come up with a diagnosis and a clear schedule on how this will be resolved. So this is trying to address early on in the process the potential problems that our projects might encounter when we take them to the market and we finally deliver them. Another thing that we're working on is on improving our procurement process, and in that sense, we have just changed our advisors' procurement policy. We have, right now we're working on our new regulation, internal regulation for ProInversión, that will allow us to have a more friendly environment towards advisors. We're pretty much taking on a lot of the best practices from the World Bank into our regulation, because this is one of the things that we encountered, is that in time we lost our ability to attract world-class advisors, and that in the end hurt the efficiency and the quality of our projects. So we're now working on coming back with the advisors community. And in the back end of the project, when it comes to project delivery, the new regulation requires us to be, ProInversión as a structuring agent, to be engaged in the post-commercial closing and financial closing period for 3 years, so that we can go along with investors, provided that we have been engaged during their negotiations, so that negotiation know-how doesn't get lost in the process, and we can come along with the ministry and with the investors and help you get this to project delivery. So that, in a broad sense, is how we are improving our project. As I said, we have been working with PPPs for more than a decade now. We have executed over 100 infrastructure projects for more than $30 billion in total investment throughout the last 12 years. And we are looking at a very ambitious portfolio for the coming years. This year alone, we'll be closing with around 12 projects for totaling around $3 billion investment. Our largest project being not really a PPP, but more of a mining asset that we're taking to the market. And on the next year, we're thinking about over 20 projects for more than $5 billion total investment. We have mostly transport in there with highways and roads in Lima. We also have electricity, energy power, transport lines, transmission lines, which is something that we have become very good at, and we have a very competitive market with the best Italian, Spanish, Chinese players already participating in it. And then we are also developing very aggressively our social portfolio. For 2018, we have a few hospitals coming into the market, but for 2019, we have around $1 billion investments in hospitals in Peru alone, and also we're working with schools, and we are right now preparing a few projects around jails construction that should be coming into market around 2019 or 2020. That should also be very, very interesting for the markets. On top of our execution of P3, we also do the promotion of P3s, and we have an investor relations office also that's very much engaged in, with investors and provide all necessary support and guidance for companies that have not entered the Peruvian market yet, so that they can become acquainted with our regulation, with our procedures, and in case they even need to partner up with operational partners, we can also provide them with a list of international and local companies, EPCMs or operators that are already working in the country that could probably help you create a consortium around our projects. So this is pretty much what we're doing right now, and we're very optimistic about the coming years, in the sense that the focus of this administration, of the Peruvian government right now, is to boost economic activity through private investment. It's been proven that in the periods where private investment were at its height, it's when the economy has been growing the most. So our focus as an administration right now is to get private investment engaged in the country and increase its participation. And as such, our work in the Peruvian government is a priority, and we're happy to welcome new investors.
Thank you so much, Alberto. We've heard already. We've already sort of tapped into a couple of the first questions that we had put forward while we're waiting to see whether anyone from the audience wants to jump in. But a sort of theme comes up. Maybe Strover started this with talking about the separation of the regulatory functions of the PPP unit from the technical assistance, I think was the term that you used. And it just reminds me that these are three countries that have had many cycles of initiatives to bring the private sector into infrastructure service delivery since really the beginnings or the middle of the 1990s. There was an American civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson, said, "You learn while you burn." Sergio, tell us a little bit about what you've learned from the past attempts of concessioning, of PPPs in Mexico, and how those lessons are informing the way in which you're bringing your PPPs to market now.
Okay. First, the whole idea is to give the private sector the confidence that what the government says is going to happen, and it not necessarily does in the past.
Right.
So. Even the Mexican government has been so protective with these private investments in infrastructure. It is very costly for the Mexican government to go to rescue the project. So I think the main lesson has been to launch the projects well prepared. As they are more in advance, it's going to be less costly for the Mexican government, and if we settle a good project, we can for sure transmitting the risk to the private sector in which issues we want to do that, because we think we transmit the risk to the private sector, but then we need to enter and to rescue because we didn't fulfill what we needed to do. So that has been the main lesson, to launch the projects well prepared, and to give a right legal framework. Mexico launches PPP law. Even Mexico has experience in concessions and participating with the private sector since the 80s. We didn't have a PPP law, so we launched the PPP law in 2012 in order to give more certainty to the investors, and it's in progress. So every day we are launching new projects, and I think that they are being more attractive to the investors. An example of what we did well is all the promotion of the hydrocarbons auctions that have been happened in Mexico for the last 3 to 4 years, because there we are finding that there is a lot of participation, that the prices are even better than we thought, and in second place in the energy and electricity reform, that we are having a lot of participation, not only of Mexican participants, but also with international investors. So
excellent.
We're on that.
So let's take this idea of, you mentioned the hydrocarbons auctions, you mentioned the bundling of some of the social assets, the schools, into larger packages. Let's take this idea and come back to it in a minute, if you will, about what we're doing and what you're doing in order to bring the investment packages to size, to scale, that would attract the right kind of investors. And let's go back up to the issue of risk allocation. It's been signaled to us already as a question. I think we ourselves have talked about this as an important issue. It's inferred in your point about separating regulation. It's inferred in your comments about focusing on the structuring of the projects. And I guess Sergio was making the same point. But give us a more specific sense about what you're doing to address political risk, regulatory risk, those governance concerns that so many investors who are not that familiar with your markets have in the back of their heads before they make the decision about whether or not to invest. Maybe Strover, start us off and give us a sense of how South Africa and how Treasury is helping investors to manage those risks, both from a credit side and from an investor side.
I mean, we've done a couple of good initiatives. Having the regulation enacted, and more so having the framework, which is your manuals and guides in terms of step-by-step, what needs to be done, and the procedures, how to follow it. But over and above that, that didn't give us that confidence that we're in control. Because what normally happens, if things go wrong, when you look at the guide, it tells you what to do, but the enforcement is not in the guide. It resides with another institution. It might be your Auditor General's office, or it might be a mechanism either through your courts or a dispute resolution mechanism in the contract. And when those happen, it's a little bit too late to do anything about them, because they can trigger implications either through the contract or financing instruments and all that. So what we have done in terms of separation of powers, we've formed what we call a regulatory office. So there is a regulatory office that is solely responsible to enforce what the regulation is saying, and also they'll be able to ensure that if the client department says that they're going to pay and they're unable to pay, the regulator then becomes a body that makes sure that that payment goes through, whether the client department wants it or doesn't want it. And the regulator also oversees the contingent liability that is created on this particular PPP, to say they need to monitor it, not to trigger a default, because once that has been triggered, National Treasury has to pay that. So that regulation office sits in the National Treasury. And more so, if there's an issue that's been picked up, whether it's a currency risk, political risk, and everything, at least you have a place to channel it within the system to say, you now go to the regulator and voice this concern, than speaking to the client, who is the service provider and the client, trying to sort out country-related issues. So that's the enhancement that we have done, and it has worked perfectly well with us, because our track record now, we don't even have a PPP that has defaulted as we speak.
Interesting. So you haven't had a PPP that's defaulted. This regulator has a sufficient degree of independence that it gives confidence to overseas investors?
All the powers that is in the regulation has been vested in the regulator. They can be able to approve deviations, they approve projects, they approve approvals. They even meet with the investors and alleviate their fears in terms of the project itself. How is it structured? What can be changed? So that's a forum that has been created to be able to address these issues, because some of the, not to speak bad about the technical advisory you need, but some of our projects, we are biased in terms of approving the project ourselves. But so that independent office becomes the office to go to if ever issues are identified.
Interesting. Alberto, tell us about Peru's efforts in order to address political risk, regulatory risk, perceptions of sovereign risk and counterparty risk.
Well, I mean, we rely heavily on our macroeconomic fundamentals and our background. I mean, for the last 20 years, we have had a very stable political environment. I think political risk is not really an issue when it comes to our discussion with investors. Our currency is fairly stable also for the last few years. Within, I mean, having said that, there is a mechanism that we use, which is called stability agreements. I mean, regulatory stability agreements that can be signed with the Peruvian government, and that pretty much freeze like tax conditions and regulatory conditions for those investors that choose to. It is also important to mention that within the Peruvian regulation, there is no discriminatory treatment between local and foreign investors, so they are treated the same. And in any case, if there is something that's perceived that should be or could be discriminatory treatment, this could be taken to the courts, and I think it's even a constitutional right that everybody has. In our contracts, we do have international arbitration clauses that are standard. We have actually used a few of them in a few cases where some controversies have arisen, and the Peruvian government has been very obedient on the result of those arbitrations, and that has provided a very stable environment for investors to come into the country. I don't think, I mean, as I mentioned, political risk doesn't come often into our radar. Currency risk is usually managed. I mean, we do have a capital market that do provide hedge instruments in terms of foreign exchange risk or even interest rate risk. I guess we still, I mean, most of the risk that we see or we perceive that investors see in our portfolio, it's related to land acquisition right of way, as I mentioned, and government fulfilling their commitments in terms of securing that land and freeing interferences.
This is a good opportunity to drill down a little bit. Alberto starts to lead us into risks outside of the political counterparty and governance type of risk, more into those that are project specific, land acquisition concerns, currency. What do you find are the specific risks that the companies, the investors that you are dealing with is raising with you at that level, and if there's anything that you'd like to share with us about what you've done to help them or how you've seen them manage and mitigate those risks?
Maybe in Mexico, in the federal level, I think that you don't have too much political risk. Mexico has done its job in these macroeconomic fundamentals, an independent central bank. Their reforms are constitutional, so you need more than 2/3 of the Congress in order to change them. So, but it might, we have a pendant a signature in the subnational level. The main problem to launch projects in Mexico is land acquisition. Yes, it's the right of ways. So we need to do more job around that because, and I think most of these problems are provoked by the hurry to launch the project. So then in the process we are going to make the land acquisition. So and we are not making the right job in socializing the projects and to prepare them with enough anticipation. So that's what we need to work more. And I don't think it's a problem with title insurance issues, but yes, that might you start the project with not the 100% of the land acquired, the rights of way, so it then create additional costs to the investors because they need to have the machinery stopped in one moment in time. there are mechanisms to compensate that, but it is not comfortable for the investors to, even they get the compensation, it's not a comfortable way to invest in Mexico. So that's one of the things that we need to enforce more.
Very interesting. And Strover, about the investment, the direction of investment, we see South African firms investing all over Africa. We see Standard Bank of South Africa investing. Is this going to be largely a domestically financed and domestically developed PPP market, do you think, going forward, all of these assets that you've described? Or are you seeing a lot of interest from overseas companies? Will they be partnering? Are they typically partnering with South African firms? How are you handling the overseas investors' interest? I suppose you're here at the conference because somebody have set you up at the softball game. But I suppose this is something that people will be asking. I mean, traditionally, South Africa itself is a major investor in these.
I mean, tackling that question, South Africa is the chair of, under the AU and the NEPAD, is the chair of the infrastructure program. And our president they have identified about 7 projects that South Africa has to take a lead. And over and above that, there's what you call presidential strategic identified project sits in the president's office, which are about 707, which are also regional projects.
Okay.
So we, based on the move of investors, it's guided by the policy that says South Africa needs to become a gateway in terms of development of the entire region so that they can be able to have the required infrastructure and be able to support the entire region. So the banks are moving in those lines, investors coming from outside South Africa, partnering with companies in South Africa. So they've got an opportunity to spread out to the entire region and be able to connect. I mean, some of the infrastructure that are identified are very crucial, meaning that some of them are social infrastructure or economic infrastructure. So they're going to connection in terms of the roads and be able to, we're assisting them in terms of port establishment and also airports. So those are connective infrastructure in the region. And the banks are moving on that line because they want to establish themselves. When those infrastructure take off, they'll be able to link up with South African program. I mean, one of the projects that is sitting in our presidency's office is the north to south corridor,
right?
Which is based on the priority number 1 in the region. But looking at the inter treaties that are required to be signed, and more so the infrastructure that's required to do that project, it's not even able to sit on one country's balance sheet.
Right.
But the other countries' balance sheet are not as strong enough to hold their share, because, I mean, for moving goods from South Africa to Tanzania, it takes about 15 days. And that's a long lead time that you can, if with correct infrastructure, you can be able to move goods in and out of Africa as quickly as possible.
Interesting. So South Africa will bring us regional projects, not just behind the border investments. Alberto, you had mentioned Spanish companies, Italian companies. You ran through a few countries. You didn't mention Canadian companies. Have you seen any Canadian firms investing in Peru? I know Mexico has seen Laquez, CDPQ in its renewable sector. Probably other construction firms and companies as well. Tell us a little bit about the types of firms you're seeing and why you think that profile of firm or that nationality of firm is more naturally attracted to what you're doing.
I mean, Canadian companies are mainly present in the mining sector, so it doesn't really work into the PPP environment. We are trying to attract more Canadian companies into the P3 environment, and given that we as ProInversión are in a way model behind the P3 Canadian model. So we would love to have more of the Canadian exposure with us. We are attracting mostly companies that in a way have been present through a private activity in the country. But some of our sectors have presented relatively large and attractive attributes for new companies to come in. Early on into this year, we had a transmission line tender that attracted Thermaplus, which is the Italian transmission company in Europe, and this is the first time they ever set foot in the Peruvian market. And the reason they did that is because although that project was around $20 million, which is kind of small for our portfolio, there was another project coming up that was estimated to be around $500 million. And I think they were they had their eye on that, so they did a strategic move into the market, thinking or waiting for that new other project, and they actually bid on that project. That was won by a Colombian consortium that has already been operating in the country for a long time, and the bid was very close. It was like a 1% difference between the two of them. It was like a photo finish. It was really exciting, and a lot of these companies have been making their way. Some of them are new, like this Italian company that came in because they recognize that potential GDP growth in Peru is one of the largest in the region. Our macroeconomic stability proves and has been proven resilient to tough economic environments. Increasing copper prices have provided additional support for increased GDP growth in the coming years. We are right now, the last quarter on a year-on-year basis, posted a 6% increase. And we're expected to have around 4% growth for the next year. So that in itself, along with currency stability and political risk stability, our investment, we're above investment grade right now. I think it's attracting companies that have not been in the country for a while. We do recognize that we were impacted by the Odebrecht issue early on this year and last year, that in a way kind of froze our programs. And we were not very active as we were trying to come out of all these very troublesome times. We are now out of that. We have reactivated the program, and we are going to tender out probably around 9 additional projects just before the year end. So we are working on that very, very, very actively, and we are waiting to have new construction company moving in that probably during the time of the Odebrecht and all of these companies didn't see the Peruvian market as transparent enough. So a lot of what we're doing now is working on transparency and predictability, so that we can provide the market with a certainty on our portfolio and our processes in order to ensure that they can come in and do secure investments.
Are your bid documents or your contracts made public?
Completely. You can go to www.proinversión.gov.pe. You'll see my picture on the front. Don't be afraid. and then every single process document, either past or present, is in there. And this actually, it's as soon as it is approved, it goes on the web page. This is the main way we actually communicate to the bidders in the consortium, and it's very transparent. I mean, one of the biggest projects we have right now, which is actually a mining project, but it's a $2 billion investment, has like bidding reference. The contract is in there, and every single change to the bidding terms is posted in there. It's part of our internal regulation that all documents go online as soon as they get approved.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Strover, help me bring South Africa to this level of exposure that Sergio, by putting up his slides and talking about the portal, Alberto, by describing his photo and the internet link. How does the investing community find out about exactly what is going on in the portfolio, in the pipeline of projects in South Africa, what role they're going to play, what the bidding, where the bidding documents are? Is it good enough to give them your email address, or is there an interface that they should go and search for?
Yes, what you have under the technical government technical advisory unit, there is you go to our website, which is www.gtech.gov.za, and that's where you find all the framework, all the regulation, and all the guidance in terms of our project pipeline, and also each and every contact person that's allocated that particular project, who's the responsible person in the unit who manages that. And counter to that, the client department, which is the project officer who's managing that project, is there. The responsibility of putting tender documentation lies with the client department. So that's where we have all the documentation on the client department's website to say they advertise. So what we just put an advert on ours so that we can redirect you to the client department's website. And over and above that, what we have done on our site with regards to the transparency and all, we're running a foundation training that updates the market in terms of where are we with regards to projects. And we train both private sector and public sector with regards to the framework, our processes, and the guides in terms of what do we do. So mostly we do have that under control. What I think probably going forward that we need to be able to do, which we haven't done, is also looking in terms of putting on our website the contracts themselves and be able to manage the contingent liability that resides with the regulator. That's an initiative that we're looking into and seeing how we can do that, providing such a portal. But we are having a meeting, I think, next week with the World Bank. They're assisting us with that. And we're setting up the entire system because they're going to be able to set up the system electronically and be able to see how can we then be able to manage the contingent liability going forward, what triggers, what formulas are we going to be able to use, your debt service cover ratio. It should not be the client's only responsibility, but it should also be our office to have a tool. And that tool should be made also available to the public to say, this is the true reflection of what we see. Because in terms of reporting, we need to report on those aspects.
That's great. So we have 4 minutes left, give or take, and we were asked a question about what we are doing at the World Bank to introduce more standardization into the process of PPPs in our client countries. You were starting to describe some of that. I don't want to kill our last 4 minutes sort of talking about the things that the bank is doing. But if it's useful, at least to mention that I think all of the governments that are serious in this business, particularly the 3 that we have here, have worked towards a standardization in the approach and the process, from the prioritization of investments to the way in which the pipelines are structured and are made public, to risk assessment of the projects, the management, the valuation and the management of contingent liabilities, so that investors know that the governments can actually make their commitments, make their payments on offtake or whatever the commitments happen to be. This is the direction that we are moving in. Ourselves, like other multilateral development banks, are trying to play the role of assisting the governments to do this. And I think that this is where we're going to bring comfort to many of the investors. So that's kind of my 40-second pitch about the World Bank's role in this thing, financing notwithstanding. But if we can, maybe this gives us a chance to go back to the pipeline, the portfolio. You each started to tease out this issue of bundling, if I may use that word, of bringing the assets together, of bringing them to market through auctions with mechanisms that make it easier for the investors to come in. Can you each give me one last word on what you're doing in Mexico, in South Africa, in Peru, to make it easier for the investors, such as what you were starting to describe with the bundling of the assets?
First. So in Mexico, we're working, it's an ongoing work in trying to standardize the different processes. We don't have, as ProInversión, an entity that makes all the auctions, but try to influence as a bank with the entities to force them to adopt better practices. Otherwise, we won't participate in the financing. So we are working on that. We are, as we are helping these entities, these new entities, to develop their projects, what we are doing is to make that job that ProInversión has done for a long time, is to force them to try to use the same standards, to use the better practices, and that's what we are doing for making it easier for you.
Interesting. And the auction on the hydrocarbons was a successful auction?
Yes, it was. It has been a lot of different auctions. The first round was only 1/3 was assigned, but the second and the third round was totally, almost fully assigned to the investor. So.
And how big was that program, more or less? How big was that program in terms of the gigawatts or in terms of the volume?
The hydrocarbons? Oh, no, I think that we are, in the hydrocarbons, I don't have the figure, but it's a lot of money. We are talking about investments for more than $30 billion in different opportunities in the hydrocarbon sectors. And in the electricity sector, I think that we are talking more than 60 gigawatts and that have been auctioned in different instances. And the last one is, I think, is the cheapest price in the world by now. So I think that we are doing, in some cases, the right job. So what we are doing is to maintain these standards in all the sectors.
So Strover, we see scale, bringing projects to market in scale through auctions, through large banks of power programs. What about South Africa? Tell us a little bit about how you're starting to bundle, particularly the municipal assets.
Yeah, I'll end up with the municipal assets. In the interest of time, I'll just name them. We've got one project where 120 schools are bundled up. It's going to the market early next year. And with regards to national departments, as I indicated, there's 3 provinces. KZN province, we've got about more than 20 departments going out to market. And in the Eastern Cape, we've got about 7 to 8 departments went to the market. Surprising enough, the banks didn't want to participate. But anyway.
Interesting. Okay.
Moving forward, we'll take that offline.
Yeah, leave us with something more positive than the banks didn't want to participate.
It's not a negative output. To us, it's a learning curve because there are things in the tender document that the market were not in agreement to. And it gives us an opportunity to go and change them and go back to the market.
Excellent.
Because basically, the framework allows it to say, if you're not happy with it, don't participate. And if government doesn't listen, they will get a feedback like this one, and then they'll rethink their strategy.
That's great.
So in the municipal space, we bundle up wastewater treatment plants. And what we're handling with is the jurisdiction in terms of municipal boundaries. So once you've sorted out the legislation part, then the bundling becomes easy, and then we can be able to take out to the market as packaged as that. But we're just sorting out the legislative framework first.
Interesting.
Okay.
A lot of exciting opportunities ahead in South Africa. And give us the final word, Alberto. We're at 0 seconds, so you can...
Invest in Peru.
So you have as much time as you need. Invest in Peru.
No, in terms of bundling, we're doing a lot of bundling into our social portfolio. We have packages of schools that are bundled together. We have around, I think it's around 50 schools that are worth around $400 million that will probably come into market in 2019. We're also doing our water treatment plants bundling, also with the same rationale around location. We'll be taking to market in the first quarter next year a program for water treatment, residual water treatment plants in Lake Titicaca, very important to clean up the lake. It's around $350 million investment and comprises 10 plants, 6 of them for design, build, own, operate, and transfer, and 4 of them for own, operate, and transfer. And this is a very important project for the communities up there by the lake because the lake is a huge part of their culture. And preserving the lake, it's very important for the government. And then we will also be looking into bundling a lot of our healthcare projects and our jail projects. But we are just on the formulation stage, so as we come up with more detailed plans, we'll see how on the structuring phase we come together with the bundling and invest in Peru.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's a great panel. I guess we see big programs coming forward. We see greater standardization, security, disclosure of information, and packages of projects to give critical mass to the investors. So congratulations to South Africa, Mexico, and Peru. and thank you so much for joining me on this panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.